Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I already know we're going to have a great discussion today because we've been giggling off the air, but we really are going to be talking about something very serious. And so I encourage everyone to tune in, listen good, pay attention, because we're going to be providing some great information here. So please join me in welcoming Doug Noll to our program today. Welcome, sir. How are you doing?
I am incredible.
I love it. I tell people I'm hunky-dory or peachy keen.
There you go. You're dating yourself, but that's okay.
I know. But yeah, that's fine. So let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this. So Doug Noll, JD, MA, is a distinguished fellow of the International Academy of Mediators, the world's most prestigious mediation organization. He is a recipient of IAM's Sid Leezak Award of Excellence. As an adjunct professor at Pepperdine University's Straus Institute of Dispute Resolution, ranked number 1 in the nation, Doug teaches graduate courses on decision-making under stress and conflict resolution. Doug is the author of 4 books, including the best-selling De-Escalate, which has sold more than 45,000 copies and translated into 5 languages, and the forthcoming book, Empathy Leadership, the powerful skill that drives winning results. It will be out later this year. Doug delivered, I was reading ahead, Doug delivered a TEDx talk entitled How to Listen Someone into Existence. And we'll have a link to that in the show notes. So again, Doug, welcome.
Thank you, Deb. And for everybody who's listening, I do this with all the fantastic hosts that invite me onto their show so they can harass me. 5-star review. Spotify, Apple, I don't care where you are. Right now, stop, hit 5 stars, and give Deb all the credit she needs so that her podcast can get heard far and wide.
Well,
she can't do it herself, but I can. 5 stars. Do it. Make it happen.
Go for it. I love it. And the reason I get 5 stars is because I have absolutely fabulous guests. And I already know that you are definitely included in that. So tell us a little bit more about how it is that you got to where you are today.
Oh boy.
I know.
You
only have less than an hour, so.
I know. I'm going to make this real quick. Reader's Digest version. So I'm a native Californian. Today I live about 60 miles south of Yosemite National Park at the base of the Sierra Nevada with my wife and 2 dogs, 2 cats, and 7 chickens on 10 acres. I grew up in Southern California and went to Dartmouth College. I was an English lit major at Dartmouth and then came back to California, went to law school. I did well academically in law school, so ended up with my first job out of law school clerking for an appellate judge, and then went into private practice here in Central California. And I joined the law firm in September of 1978 and tried my first civil jury trial in October of 78. I wasn't even in private practice 4 weeks, and I was in the courtroom. And that's how my career went for the next 22 years. In the mid-80s, I picked up the martial arts, and around 1990 or so, I was awarded my 2nd degree black belt. And my teacher told me to start studying Tai Chi as a martial art, not as a contemplative practice. And Tai Chi has 2 really interesting paradoxes. One is the softer you are, the stronger you are, the more vulnerable you are, the more powerful you are. Soft to be strong, vulnerable to be powerful. Did not compute. Right. Trial lawyer, 2nd degree black belt. Right. Sorry, that doesn't work.
Pound.
Yeah, exactly. Until it did. I was in a courtroom some years later cross-examining somebody, and the thought came to me, what the heck am I doing in here? And after that trial, I had a whitewater trip planned up in Idaho and spent 10 days on the main salmon and was in my raft by myself thinking about how many people I had really served as a trial lawyer. and I could only count 5 people. And I made the decision on that trip, I'm not doing this anymore. But I didn't know what I was going to do. So I came back to town, drove down out of the mountains to my office, and the universe provides. I heard the one and only public service announcement for a new master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies. So to make a long story short, I signed up, got it accepted, and for 3 years, back in graduate school, 20 years after law school, learning how to become a peacemaker. And ultimately, I left the practice of law in 2000 to become a peacemaker. Now, the thing that's really interesting is that I studied human conflict from every imaginable perspective and discipline. But the one thing that I was not taught, because nobody knew, was how to de-escalate an angry person, how to calm people down. And I was getting called into high stakes cases as a mediator and peacemaker to help people calm down and solve problems. And I didn't have any really good tools. I had taken nonviolent communication, active listening. I mean, anybody that said anything about listening or communication, I took their courses. All of it worthless, totally worthless.
No.
And I didn't have anything any better. I mean, that's all people taught us because that's all there was, until I had an insight. And I talk about this in my TEDx talk that I gave in April. And I won't go through the whole story right now, but I had this massive insight that completely transformed the couple I was working with in that mediation, and has transformed hundreds of thousands of people ever since. And the insight is this: when you are dealing with really angry, upset people, you've got to ignore the narrative, ignore the stories underneath, ignore the words, and listen to and name their emotions. So this was an insight that I got, and my back was against the wall, so I did it, and it worked. And then 2 years later, the science caught up. A seminal study out of Matthew Lieberman's lab at UCLA supported and showed in the brain everything that I had observed. And so now I had the science to support the practice. And so I began teaching this. That led me, with my dear friend and colleague, Laurel Coffer, to co-found Prison of Peace, which found us in 2010 in the largest, most violent women's prison in the world, training 15 women how to be peacemakers to stop prison violence. And the success in that prison allowed us to expand into other prisons, and for 10 years, from 2010 to the pandemic in 2020, I personally was working in California and Connecticut prisons, usually 2 to 3 days a week, training long-term and life inmates how to become peacemakers, mediators. And the very first skill we taught them was how to listen to emotions. That led to my fourth book, De-Escalate, that you mentioned, that came out in 2017. And then I started realizing that these skills have a much broader application than in conflict resolution. And that led to, I'm a Simon & Schuster author, so that led to a fifth book called Empathy Leadership, which will be out in September, which you mentioned also. And so there you go. Today, I do interventions, so people will call me in to mediate or as a peacemaker to help deal with difficult human dynamics in organizational settings, such as founder-led companies, private equity, post-acquisitions, family offices, sometimes trusts where you have beneficiaries arguing. Situations where litigation is not a good option, where litigation will destroy wealth. And I get called in to help sort all that out. And then I also spend a considerable amount of time teaching people how to prevent that stuff from happening in the first place. And so and I'm 75 years old and going strong. So it's all good.
I love it. Well, as you were talking and as I was looking at your information, it was kind of one of those where I went, oh, yeah. But of course, we right. Like when people are yelling at each other, whether it's, a married couple, a person in an office, whatever,
right.
The words are often hurtful, angry, you want to say something to do the most damage you possibly can.
That's right.
And that's not helpful because, that's not going to solve the problem. But when you realize, okay, they're coming from probably in many cases being hurt. Their feelings are hurt. They don't feel valued, all of those things. And so when you strip away that angry, nasty, and in essence say, I hear you, I feel you, is maybe the better way to put it. Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
Well, kind of. Actually, it's a little more sophisticated than that, because whenever you use an I statement, people shut down.
Yes, because then it's me.
That's right. So what we're really talking about here is nervous system leadership. When people get angry or upset, it's not because they're wrong or because they have a personality disorder, although we tend to label people,
Right.
that way. It's because their nervous systems are dysregulated. And what we know, and most people know a little bit about this, is that when we get triggered or a threat response signal comes off in our brain, the amygdala fires, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis gets activated, cortisol floods our body, and the prefrontal cortex becomes inaccessible to us, and we just act impulsively, basically how we acted when we were 6 years old.
Right. If even that old, right? We throw our toys.
Right. The reason, and by the way, let me just stop right there and say the reason that we go back to childhood reactions is because we never matured past that point, because our parents coached us that emotions are bad, emotions are evil, emotions are wrong. You are not allowed to be emotional. You're not allowed to feel. Don't feel that way. And we can come back to that. Emotional invalidation is the most pervasive and insidious form of child abuse that exists, and it's everywhere. Anyways, so we've all been invalidated. We come to adult. We make it to adulthood, usually some way or another. And then when we get stressed, we go right back to where we were when we were 6 years old. And the only mechanism, what we have to think about is that logic and reasoning. You can't reason somebody out of pain. You can't logic them out of emotion, because they're just physically incapable, neurologically incapable of that. So what we have to do is we have to work at the nervous system level. And that's what this skill called affect, AFFECT, affect labeling does. And it's very simple. We use a very precise phrase, you feel, and follow with an emotion. You feel angry. You're frustrated. You feel disrespected. And there's 7 layers of emotions that you learn, and we work through, and you work through the layers as appropriate, depending upon the context. And the effect is to help the person who's upset re-regulate themselves. So you're not calming them, you're helping them calm themselves. And
telling somebody calm down is one of the worst things you can say.
That's one of the worst things you can do. There are all kinds of other things that people say that blow up in your face. When you name somebody's emotions using a you statement, they begin to re-regulate, and they calm themselves down. And then there's a relaxation response we look for. And when you see that relaxation response, you ask a question, anything else, to find out, to make sure that you've got it all covered. They'll say no. And then now you can ask the question you've been wanting to ask, which is, well, how are we going to go about solving this problem? But I had to spend 90 to 120 seconds naming emotions before I could ask that question and get a coherent response. And that's what people don't get. And that's what I teach, is that it's in a leadership context, I call this nervous system leadership. You can't use logic, persuasion, numbers, facts, reasoning, analysis, analytical decision-making, none of that stuff. It's all high level. It all gets trumped by emotions.
Right.
So if you've got a dysregulated nervous system in your room, it's going to spread through emotional contagion. And the likelihood of getting any effective decision-making, for example, is next to zero. And this is what I teach my graduate students in my decision-making class, is that the first step of any leader is to make sure that the nervous systems in the room are calm and regulated. If they are not, then you have to get them regulated before you can do anything else. And the good news is it's not hard to do, and it doesn't take a lot of time.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I like crowd mentality, right? It just, and one of my favorite stories, I mentioned to you that I live here in Atlanta, and there's a young woman here who is now running for governor, but she was the Atlanta mayor, and we were having riots, and she went, and I mean, tensions were obviously high. Things were being thrown, things were being caught on fire, all sorts of things. And she's not a large woman. And she went stomping off down into the crowd. And I was watching this on TV, and you saw her security people going, right? And she went up to the person that, was, and, she went up And she stopped in front of him and she said, enough. You go home. She kept saying you, right? You have made your point. We hear you. Now it's time to go home. Now it's not the same thing because she was, but
she could have been more effective had she said, you're really angry and frustrated. You're not feeling heard. You're not feeling.
Yeah. But the funny thing was, he said, she mommed me. But that comes back to what you were saying, right?
Right.
Except she really did de-escalate it. And
amazing.
Yeah, and it was because she didn't act like she was afraid. I'm guessing she was probably just terrified. Because there were certainly not enough of her security people there to do much if things got out of hand. But she showed them that she felt they were important. They were important enough for her to go talk to them.
Well, here's the thing, Deb. Our brains, in every waking moment, in every microsecond, are asking 3 questions. Am I safe with you? Mm-hmm. Can I trust you? Mm-hmm. Do I matter to you? Mm-hmm. Right. If the answer to any of those questions is no, the nervous system gets dysregulated. So what did she do? She walks into this crowd. She goes up to the leader, the instigator, and says, enough, time to go home. And she uses a tone of voice that resonates with him because it's mom talking to him.
Right.
And the answers to those questions for him in that moment were, yeah, I feel safe with this woman. Yeah, I trust her. Yeah, I really do matter to her. She's telling me to go home.
Right.
Not because I did anything wrong, but just because it's over with.
Right. Yeah.
And that is the essence of superb leadership.
Right. And that comes back to that word empathy, right? It
That's
doesn't mean that we're feeling the same thing because we don't feel the same thing, but when tell us what it is when somebody has empathy for someone else.
So here's that's a great question because most people get this wrong. In the old traditional sense, the word empathy comes from a German word back, I think it was coined in the 1880s sometime, and then it got translated in the early 20th century. And it used to mean being able to feel what somebody else is feeling, but that is not useful to us. Empathy today, especially when we use it in a leadership context, empathy is the learned ability or skill to recognize and name another person's emotional experience from their frame of reference. So it's learnable. It is 2 things. 1, recognizing what somebody's feeling, naming that feeling precisely with a you statement. And that's from their frame of reference. That's why we say from their frame of reference. So that means you're going to use a you statement, not an I statement. And it's measurable. And the results, the outcomes are measurable. So this is not some touchy-feely, soft skill thing that, is kind of a nice to have or what everybody preaches to you. This is a hard neurological skill based on nervous system leadership.
Right. But most people think it is a soft skill. They think it's an emotion, and emotions have no place in the workplace.
Right. And so human beings have no place in the workplace. Here's what I teach. There's no such thing as rationality. It's a myth. And we've been lied to for 3,500 years that human beings are rational beings. We're not rational beings, not even close. We are emotional beings. We have moments when we can engage in deliberative thinking. But every decision we make and every emotion, every decision, every behavior we engage in is emotional. And in fact, the science shows that if we didn't have emotions, we couldn't make decisions.
Right.
And so to say that we are rational and emotions don't exist in the workplace or they don't exist in the modern business world is just a statement of profound, it's 2 things. 1, ignorance, but more importantly, fear. We're afraid of emotions because we've never been taught how to work with them.
Right. What if they cry? Right. I think that's probably many, especially when you're, and you're faced with, talking to a woman, and it doesn't matter
Crying.
if it's a peer. It's what if they cry?
And they're crying. That's a good thing. You applaud that because 1, you've created safety to allow somebody to do something like that, which is can be personal and intimate. More importantly, you're recognizing neurologically that they're going through a reset in their brain because crying is a physiological response to stress. And what it does is it cleans out the neurohormones and neurotransmitters and all the junk in the brain and allows the brain to restart. So crying
Mhm.
is not only not bad, it's
Mhm.
essential.
Mhm.
And for people who don't get that, I can guarantee you their lives are not very happy.
Right. Well, but I remember now I haven't been in corporate America for a while, but I remember, many people, including college professors, all sorts of people saying, don't cry. Do not let them see that they made you cry. You might
Right.
have to go off to the bathroom to cry. You might have to whatever. And it was funny because, the few times where I actually got upset enough, like one tear, right?
Right.
They realized,
So there's a certain amount of truth to that. You need to be able, if you're going to be effective as a leader, you have to be able to regulate your own emotions.
right. Mm-hmm.
So if somebody says something that is truly upsetting to you, and you're in a context where you need to regulate yourself, you need to be able to do something to yourself
Mm-hmm.
that will calm you down
Mm-hmm.
and allow you to function. And the easiest form of self-regulation is to simply label your own feelings. So, for example, if I were in a meeting and somebody came at me and attacked me, I would say to myself, I'm really angry right now. I'm frustrated.
Right.
I feel completely disrespected
Mm-hmm.
and I don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little anxious and I'm really pissed off and I just want to punch this person's light
Mm-hmm.
bulbs out. I would say that to
Mm-hmm. Right. Not
myself
to them.
silently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And that immediately
Mm-hmm.
has the effect of
Right.
calming my brain down. So I'm now regulating my own dysregulated
Mm-hmm.
nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other circumstances where you're one-on-one with somebody, and they need to process emotional stuff that's difficult and deep, and so and you create safety for them to cry, and that is okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. Or
That is
you
okay.
say, okay, you know what? Do you need a minute? Because they might, right?
Well, right. But I would rather say, I'm going to sit here and be present with you, Deb, for
Okay.
you to be any way you have to be.
Mm-hmm.
I am not afraid of your emotions. I'm not going to run away from them. I'm going to stand here and I want you to feel as deeply into your emotions as you need to in order to experience them.
Right. Because the biggest thing is you're validating them.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and that's the thing. But yeah, emotion, it's so funny. I was talking to a young woman earlier today in London. And and I remember when Prince Philip died, the Queen's husband.
Mm.
And of course it was during COVID when they had the funeral service. And so there she was with her little purse. We loved her little purses. And seated completely by herself in the church because, it was COVID. And they zoomed in and there was one tear. And for me, that was crushing. I mean, but I also knew because of that just how deeply she was feeling. Because, she's British, right? You have to have a stiff upper lip and you don't show that. And so that one tear was, and I think what that did, because, you kind of, there were other, it in many ways gave everyone else permission
Right.
to feel that sad.
Right.
I certainly had never met Prince Philip or the Queen, but it was like, okay, now
Right.
now it's
And there is
okay.
another example of powerful leadership.
Mhm. Right. I know. I miss the Queen. But anyhow, but that's kind of the thing too, is you always got the impression with her that she never ever raised her voice. And I think that's part of, conflict and things is when things start escalating, people, their voices start going up, right? And of course, with a woman, her voice gets higher and squeakier. But she just didn't do that.
Have you ever thought why that happens?
I think it was because she knew,
No. Why is it that when people are arguing, their voices go up? They get louder.
because you're tensing up and
No, no, no. They're not. They're yelling because they don't feel like they're being heard.
right. And so I'm going to be louder so you hear me.
Right. And so, of course, the other person can't hear anything, so they get louder, and all of a
Right.
sudden, it's like this, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you have this explosion, and that's true in every single argument.
Mm-hmm.
The simple
Mm-hmm.
fix
Mm-hmm.
to just listen to them. You're angry.
Mm-hmm.
You're really frustrated right now. You don't feel heard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And and we've been told, I don't know if it's right or wrong, is do not match their tone. If they are yelling, don't yell back.
That's not true.
See, I knew.
The key here is to not match their tone, but come in right underneath it.
Okay.
So you would say, man, Deb, you are really angry. And you say, yeah, I'm angry. And I say, yeah, and you're really frustrated. Yeah, you're really frustrated. You feel really disrespected. Yeah, I feel really disrespected. Yeah, nobody's listening to you and you don't feel appreciated and supported. Yeah, exactly right.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to keep yelling at somebody when they're not yelling back.
You can't. But you want to make sure that if you come across with somebody who's really angry and you come across too low, too modulated, that sends a trigger that you are dismissing them and invalidating them.
Right.
So you need to be under you need to match their intensity, but be under it a little bit.
I love that. And I mean, I know you work a lot with corporations and things, and I've been in the situation where I have had bosses yell at me. I had a boss one time who, the man threw chairs, the man swore, all sorts of things. And I've shared this on the podcast before that, and this is before we had HR people, and so, right. And,
the kindergarten cops, right?
Yes, and he really did swear. I mean, that was, and I remember I told him, and I was his office manager, so I was pretty much second in command. And I was in my 20s. I mean, but this red hair, it might be enhanced, but it's always been red. And, and I told him, I said, you get to call me that B word once. And he kind of looked at me, and we weren't arguing. I mean, it was just he and I were kind of having a discussion. And I said, you do it a second time and I own your company. And he did. He called me that word once. And all I did was hold up one finger. And you talk about de-escalate. Boy, you were, but he also knew I wasn't going to take it from him. And I think that's part of it too, is, I was not going to let him disrespect me. Now, sometimes it meant walking away, but often I just let him yell. And it's kind of back to the toddler, right? You let them stomp and scream and get it out of their system. And
I want to correct that idea too. This is the idea that letting people vent it's from Freud, catharsis.
Right.
Let me explain why. Well, first of all, Freud built his whole model of mind based on what was going on in the Industrial Revolution and in the 19th century and early 20th century, steam driven. So he looked at boilers overheating and blowing up and valves not working properly, and used that as a metaphor for talking about neuroses and psychoses and release. Not one bit of science supports any of that. All the science shows is that when you let people vent and get angry and be angry, they're only going to get angry because here's what's happening. Let me explain the science behind this. When we get angry or triggered, there is I mentioned it before. It's the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis fires off, cortisol fires. That whole process, the neurochemical process in the brain, lasts for about 90 seconds, and then it's gone, unless we re-trigger.
Right, and
how do we re-trigger? We start getting angrier and angrier, and every time we get angry and keep venting, another 90 seconds goes by. And we re-trigger ourselves and re-trigger ourselves and re-trigger ourselves. When we affect label and help people start to stabilize their nervous system, they re-regulate. That we do not add fuel to the fire. We're taking fuel away from the fire, and they calm down. And that's why venting and catharsis and the idea of letting people just go at it is really it's only going to make things worse.
It does. It because when you start, then that is when, especially if you feel that they're not paying attention to you.
Oh, right? Absolutely.
Then you're going to start throwing the words in, the hurtful things, and I don't care, what it is, if it's personal or a business relationship or something like that. It's also maybe, you could tell I don't have kids. So maybe this is back to the 3-year-old. If you let them just keep screaming, they think, okay, this is acceptable behavior.
That's right. So you're reinforcing the behavior you don't want, as opposed to, and this I've taught a lot of parents these skills. You take your 2.5-year-old or 3-year-old who's having a temper tantrum, and you start labeling emotion. You're really angry. You're frustrated. You want that, and you can't have it, and you're really unhappy. Yeah, and you're really feeling overwhelmed right now. Yeah, and you're really, 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 really sad. Yeah. Boom, gone, over with.
Right. Yeah.
What parents tell me, what parents write to me when they learn these skills is that typically if they label their children's emotions, tantrums are gone within 3 to 4 months and they never come back. And here's the other thing that's really amazing. If you take the time to label your children's emotions starting at a fairly young age, 3, 4, 5, by the time they're 8 or 9 years old, they're 2 grade levels academically ahead of their peers. Because it turns out that the emotional brain, if it's allowed to mature and a child is not invalidated, that the emotional parts of the brain and the cognitive parts of the brain grow together. But if we emotionally invalidate and tell children you can't feel, then their emotional brain does not mature. Their cognitive brain matures.
Right.
And they are left with sort of being a little bit of a paraplegic,
Right.
and
they think
metaphorically.
there's something wrong with them.
Or there's something wrong with them. And that's why when you look at 40-year-olds who are screaming at each other, they're acting like 6-year-olds because they are. They're in that moment, they're 6 years old.
Right.
So this stuff is not only about de-escalating and having difficult conversations with adults. For parents, it's kind of the go-to skill for building really healthy, resilient children.
Right. Right. And I think back on bosses that I've had that have been really good at that. When they were able to, calm the situation by acknowledging,
That's right.
I know that this, and the bad part is I haven't had as many bosses that have been like that as have been, the mean, nasty ones. Maybe I've been in the wrong places. But, it is something where, it does, obviously it works.
works.
And so I want you to tell us more about Prison of Peace.
Oh,
Because
okay.
this just fascinated me. And it was interesting because I met somebody a month or so ago, and she was talking about she's a prison warden here in Atlanta. And turns out she's a prison warden at the male prison. And she started doing a lot of what you're talking about, respecting them, giving, talking to them, not, and there are people who are anomalies. So we're just going to kind of, that you can't, sometimes there are some people that just, you can't do.
Very small. You're right, but it's a very small percentage.
And the vast majority, you can. And she said for her, treating them with respect. And she said it really didn't matter to her what they did.
That's right.
And she
That's
said
right.
she treated them with respect.
That's
and
right.
and she said, and I will never yell at them.
That's right. So Prison of Peace. I'm here in Central California and minding my own business on August 9th, 2009, and I get a phone call from my dear friend and colleague Laurel Kloffer. And we're both adjunct professors at Pepperdine. She was a well-known mediator and activist in Southern California, and we'd known each other for a while. And she said, "You got a minute?" I said, "Yeah." "Let me read you this letter. I'm standing in my mailbox." So she reads me this letter written by a woman by the name of Susan Russo, who was serving a life without possibility of parole sentence at Valley State Prison for Women, which at that time was the largest, most violent women's prison in the world. The prison was designed to hold 2,800 women, and they had 3,600 women in there. I mean, it was overcrowded and a mess. So what Susan was asking for, and she wrote out 50 letters, and we learned later that probably the last letter she wrote ended up in Laurel's box. She was asking mediators in the state to come into the prison and train the lifers how to become mediators and peacemakers to stop prison violence. So she called me.
Even think of doing that? I mean, that's the.
I'm not sure, but she was doing it from a hospital bed because she had had lung surgery, and she was doing it on behalf of what was called a networking group, which were all the lifers and long-termers in that prison. So the letter ended up in Laurel's box, and she reads it to me and says, "What do you think?" And kind of paused for a second and think about it. I said, you know, if this is real, I think we should do this.
Mhm.
So we spent the next 8 months working through the prison bureaucracy.
Mhm.
And we're both lawyers. We're both former trial lawyers,
Mhm.
pretty sophisticated, smart people.
Mhm.
Never
You've
seen
been around
anything,
some rough people.
never seen anything like this
Mhm.
before.
Mhm.
So finally, we get in front of the acting warden, Avelda Dobson Davis, another female,
Mhm.
black woman, phenomenal human being, absolutely phenomenal. And she said, yeah, let's go ahead and do this.
Mhm.
So that found us in April of 2010 in front of 15 women, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, ages 65 down to, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s, all lifers and long-termers. And our job was to teach them how to become mediators and peacemakers to stop prison violence. Well, we're both teachers and we're both published, and Laurel introduced mediation to the state of Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina. And so we both had a lot of experience, but we'd never really trained
Mhm.
incarcerated people before.
Mhm.
And in prison,
Right.
the constraints are severe
Mhm. Mhm.
and significant. It's not like teaching in a corporate
Right.
teaching
They're
center.
not sitting at desks going, "Hello,
No,
how are
you're
you
in dingy,
today?"
dirty conference rooms with no technology.
Mhm. Mhm.
Our technology were flip charts and marker pens.
Right. For
Um,
safety. Yeah, yeah.
well, that's right, because of the
Mhm.
security.
Mhm.
So, anyways, we started. And I'll go ahead and tell this story. I tell this story in my TEDx, but it's really worth relating to. So, the first thing we in our as we, the curriculum evolved over the years as we learned. But basically, what we do in the first
Mhm.
module is we teach them how to become peacemakers and not mediators yet. We call it the peacemaker module. And they learn the first thing teach them how to do is they learn how to listen.
Mhm.
And specifically, they learn how to listen to emotions. They learn how to affect label.
Mhm.
And so we spend a lot of time really drilling that into them. The very first thing we teach out of the box, the very first morning, they're learning how to listen because we know this is the foundational skill. So 5 weeks into the program, we taught every Wednesday for 8 hours. And so we show up and end up in the DR conference room, which is really dingy.
Mhm.
Half the lights don't work, everything's broken. I mean, and we walk in, and one of our students is sitting over in the corner crying and sobbing. And so we walk over, and Laurel kneels next to her and says, Sarah, what's going on?
Mhm.
And she tells us this story. She said, I'm serving a 25 to life sentence because I killed a family as an alcoholic drunk driver.
Mhm.
And in that accident, I wasn't injured. But when I came to prison, I had to give up my 3-year-old son to my sister to raise.
Mhm.
And I've written him every week
Mhm.
for 18 years.
Mhm.
He's never called, he's never visited, he's never written back. The only way I've gotten any idea of what's going on in his life is with my once a week 15-minute call with my sister.
Mhm.
Last week, I decided to write a different kind of letter based on what you guys have been teaching us. I thought about all the emotions he must feel
Mhm.
having an alcoholic, imprisoned, drunk killer as a mother.
Mhm.
Angry, frustrated, betrayed, rejected, unloved,
Ashamed.
unlovable, humiliated, pain.
Mhm.
And so I just wrote him that letter describing all of from his perspective, his frame of reference, using you statements.
Mhm.
And then she said, today, for the first time in 18 years, I received a letter back from him. And at the bottom of the letter, he wrote, Mom, I love you.
Mhm.
I'm bringing my girlfriend. We're going to come visit you in 3 weeks. And she held up the letter, and you could see where the tears had stained the ink, and her thumb was over the word love,
Mhm.
like she couldn't believe it was real, and she didn't want it to go away.
Mhm.
And she started sobbing, and I started crying.
Oh, yeah.
I stepped away. Saying, whoa. And so Laurel, I mean, we were really touched. And that's when we first realized that what we were doing
Mhm.
was so profound and transformative for people who've killed other people.
Mhm.
And so from that prison, we worked there for 3 years, and then it was repurposed into a men's prison. And then we worked in the men's prison for 3 years. We're doing this all pro bono. Everything's out of pocket. We're not getting paid for this. This is post 2008 crash, so our professional practices were hurting, and we were really, really in difficult financial situations. But we continue to do it because once you start this work, you can't stop. And then the success from there led us into getting grants
Mhm.
from the state. And then we got a grant from Singer Family Foundation in Connecticut to begin the process in Connecticut. And we eventually expanded significantly until the pandemic hit. And then when the pandemic hit, of course, we had to shut down all in-person programming.
It's not like they had Zoom.
Well, you can't do that because they don't have computers. But the state told us you got to spend all this money before the end of the fiscal year. How can we do that? We can't get into prisons. And we don't care. Spend it. So Laurel and I had always had a dream of being able to film our curriculum. And so we had the money, and we talked to the state, and they thought that was a terrific use of the funds. And so that summer, the summer of 2000, we brought in a Hollywood film crew, 3-camera shoot, the whole Megillah, and filmed our entire curriculum from start to finish. And what was really cool was we brought in 6 of our former incarcerated students who were our very best trainers, who had been released on parole and could come in and film with us. And so they were many of the actors and trainers in the filming. And now we deliver the training worldwide via Blu-ray disc. And we're in California, Connecticut, Italy, Greece, and we're negotiating with some people in Cape Town, South Africa, to start in South Africa. So that's Prison of Peace. Pretty powerful stuff.
It is. And that, of course, leads me to the question, are prisons like boardrooms?
There's no difference, really. A human nervous system is a human nervous system. You were talking earlier about the warden in your Georgia prison. With maybe one exception, there isn't a person, there is not one of my students that I met in 10 years of working in maximum security prisons that I wouldn't want to have at my dinner table. They are just like the rest of us and made bad decisions. Some of them have horrible backstories. The reason why they're
but abuse
it also gets you in understanding really quickly that the prison system is a really horrible way to deal with these kinds of problems, and we shouldn't really have prisons. Or if we have prisons, they should be very limited.
So big.
Yeah, and they should be limited. They should be limited. But I wasn't that way before I started Prison of Peace. It makes you pretty radical, pretty fast when you see how it all works. But the beauty of it is that they're nervous systems. Those people, we're all nervous systems, and our nervous systems all are predictable. And what we have to get away from are labels, inmate, murderer, whatever it might be, and or CEO. Get away from all of that and recognize that as leaders, our first job is to regulate nervous systems. Because when systems are regulated, people can think and perform. If you don't regulate the nervous system, then the thinking and the performing is hit or miss at best.
Right.
And it's the same thing in prison. To stop prison violence, regulate the nervous systems. When you have regulated nervous systems, there are no more fights and arguments. In fact, what our students all learned was that instead of resolving conflict with fists and knives, they resolve conflicts by naming emotions, and we're far more effective.
Right. Well, and people aren't getting hurt. People aren't getting killed. I mean, that's the big.
Well, not only that, they're growing. I mean, check out this statistic. I'm pretty sure this is right. We have had over 800 lifers in California prisons that we trained and certified as mediators who have been released on parole. Not one of them has reoffended.
Right. That's incredible. And because recidivism. See, I can actually say that
right.
word.
Recidivism, right? There you go.
And part of that is because they don't know how to exist outside
That's right.
prison. Right?
So many of our students said, if I learned these skills 20 years ago, I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
Happen all the time.
Yeah. And so when you've gotten where they're feeling validated, then you can teach skills.
That's right.
All of those various things.
That's right.
So, they can go out and lead productive lives.
Exactly right. And it's the same thing in the business world. No different. They're nervous systems. Right. We just have learned to dismiss nervous systems as being irrelevant. By the way, you know where the term soft skills came from?
It's a
U.S.
badge.
Army Training Command, 1977.
Yes.
And that term was coined. I actually have the original papers where that term first came up. That term came up to distinguish the skills that a battle space commander had to master that were distinguished from driving a truck or driving a tank or shooting a rifle. So when they said soft skills, it was probably a poor choice of words.
Right.
Emotional intelligence, the ability to listen, the ability to communicate, the ability to analyze, think, make decisions. See, decisions are soft skills.
Right,
Decision making is a soft skill.
Yeah, because
And then it got,
it got turned into it.
to a pejorative. It's a business pejorative. Oh, I don't want that soft skill shit, right?
Right.
Totally wrong.
Right. Oh my
But-
gosh. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, it's oh my gosh, Doug. We're on a time constraint today, and I want to be very cognizant of your time, but I would love to continue this discussion another time.
Sure,
because
anytime.
It's it really is. We were talking before the program. Things are emotional right now in so many ways. And
a lot of dysregulated nervous systems out there.
Right. And so we need to learn how we can help. That's the thing. And I keep wanting to say we can help calm things down, but that's not the right term. But yeah, we need to learn how to do this. Now, is it going to work at some of the we don't have contact with some of the people that we might need to be doing, but it can also have a ripple effect, right?
Well, that's the idea. That's the idea.
Yeah. Right.
And my goal is to teach as many millions of people as possible these skills, because if we can do this in our communities, then it's going to move up.
Yeah.
And
if
move
you're
in.
not mad at your city council meeting, or if you're not having
A
issues
school
at
board
your city
meeting,
council meeting,
or at a school board meeting, you can agree to disagree. You can disagree, but you can do it while listening to each other and not being disrespected.
Right.
That
And
I mean,
then
that's
it
powerful.
goes higher and then higher, and
That's right.
yeah, it's
That's
the
right.
opposite of the crowd, of the crowd mentality.
That's right.
And
Exactly
so
correct.
I love that. But for people who are saying, Doug, oh my God, this is very interesting. How do we reach you? So, we will have your website in the show notes.
Right.
But what are the services that you provide?
So basically, I have two pathways. One is intervention, where you have a high stakes conflict of some kind, and the human dynamics are getting in the way of either decisional velocity or whatever, personality problems, you're having retention problems, whatever it might be. And so you would call me in to work with the stakeholders. So for example, earlier this year, I worked with $1 billion private company. The stakeholders, I was brought in with the stakeholders. And by the third day, everybody was crying. And I never heard from them again. I mean, we got the work done. We got the job done. So intervention work, helping people solve this stuff. And then the second pathway is teaching people how to prevent that chaos from occurring in the first place through nervous system leadership, learning how to listen to emotions, learning how to recognize and regulate the nervous systems around you, and how to de-escalate strong emotions. So those are the two basic things that I do. My website, dougnoll.com, is an obvious pathway. My email, I'm a sole practitioner, so I don't have an entourage. So you can just email me at doug@dougnoll.com. I've got a very large YouTube library of videos I produced, a lot of content.
Right. Lots of great resources on the website.
That's right. A lot of resources,
And of course,
300
your
plus
books.
blog articles. So I've got I put out a lot of content over the years. It's pretty easy to find. And then the TEDx, which if you really want to get a grasp of what I'm really all about, the TEDx dropped 3 weeks ago, and you can just put Douglas Noll, listen to someone into existence, and look for the TEDxApex talk.
I love that. I love
And
that.
and that 12 minutes will probably change your life.
I love it. Well, as I said, we would love to have you on again. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah, I want everybody to realize that conflict is not a communication problem. Difficult conversations are not a conflict problem or a personality problem. All of the difficulties we have with each other are nervous system problems. It's just our nervous systems seeing threats. And our nervous systems cannot distinguish between a social insult or a disrespectful comment or sarcasm and a saber-toothed tiger leaping at you. It's going to react in exactly the same way. And we now have interventions that stop that from happening. And it's not difficult. and it doesn't take a long time to master. It's a little counterintuitive and a little weird in the beginning, but it's extraordinarily powerful. And the more people that can learn these skills, the better off we'll all be.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And I will love it when we have you on again. I'm Deb Creer. I've been having a fascinating discussion with Doug Noll. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.